A 17-year-old Bruce Lee stands in a boxing ring. His opponent, Gary Elms, 3-time champion, undefeated, the most feared young boxer in all of Hong Kong. The crowd expects a slaughter. But what happens next would not only shock everyone watching, it would plant a seed in Bruce Lee's mind that would eventually revolutionize martial arts forever. And here is the crazy part. Bruce Lee won this fight, dominated it. But he walked away angrier than if he had lost. Why? Because this single moment exposed a flaw that Bruce Lee would spend the rest of his life trying to fix. Stay with me. This story changes everything you think you know about Bruce Lee. Most people know Bruce Lee from his movies. The flying kicks, the lightning-fast punches, the iconic battle cries that echoed through cinema history. But before Hollywood, before Enter the Dragon, before he became the most influential martial artist who ever lived, Bruce Lee was just a teenager trying to prove himself on the dangerous streets of Hong Kong. And in 1958, he stepped into a boxing ring that would change the entire direction of his life. This is not just a story about a fight. This is the story of how Bruce Lee discovered his greatest weakness and turned it into his greatest strength. Let us go back to the beginning. Hong Kong in the 1950s was a different world. The streets were rough, gangs controlled entire neighborhoods, and young men proved themselves not with words, but with their fists. Bruce Lee was right in the middle of it. Born in San Francisco, but raised in Hong Kong, Bruce was not your typical teenager. By the age of 13, he had already started training in Wing Chun, Kung Fu under the legendary Ip Man. But here is something most people do not know. Bruce Lee was a troublemaker. He got into street fights constantly. He challenged other martial artists. He had a chip on his shoulder the size of Victoria Peak. His parents were worried. His teachers were frustrated. Everyone could see that this kid had incredible talent, but also an uncontrollable fire burning inside him. And that fire was about to be tested in a very public way. King George V School announced their annual inter-school boxing tournament. Students from across Hong Kong would compete for glory, bragging rights, and the respect of their peers. Bruce Lee saw an opportunity, not just to fight, but to prove something. You see, there was a name everyone kept whispering in the hallways: Gary Elms. Gary Elms was not just good, he was dominant. 3 consecutive years, 3 championships, 0 defeats in competitive boxing. While other students trained casually, Elms trained like a professional. His technique was sharp. His footwork was flawless. And his reputation made opponents nervous before they even stepped into the ring. When the tournament bracket was announced, everyone assumed Elms would cruise to another easy victory. But there was a problem. A young Chinese kid named Bruce Lee had also entered the competition. Now, most people expected Bruce to lose, maybe even lose badly. After all, Bruce was a Wing Chun practitioner. He trained in Kung Fu, not boxing. The styles were completely different. Wing Chun emphasized close, range combat, trapping, chain punches. Techniques designed for street fighting, not for a boxing ring with rules and regulations. Boxing was about jabs, crosses, hooks, footwork and head movement. 2 completely different worlds. and Bruce Lee was about to step into Gary Elms's world. The odds were stacked against him. The crowd expected a one-sided destruction. But they did not know Bruce Lee. They did not know what was coming. Now, before I tell you what happened in this fight, I need you to understand something important. This was not just a boxing match. This was the moment that sparked a revolution in martial arts. Everything Bruce Lee would later create. Jeet Kune Do, his philosophy, his approach to combat day. It all traces back to what happened in this ring. So pay attention, because the details matter. The day of the fight arrived. Bruce Lee walked into that gymnasium with a confidence that surprised everyone watching. He was smaller than many expected. Lean, almost skinny. Gary Elms looked at his opponent and probably felt relief. This was going to be easy. The bell rang, and immediately, something strange happened. Bruce Lee did not fight like a boxer, but he also did not fight like a traditional Wing Chun practitioner. He adapted, he moved, he flowed. He used angles that Elms had never seen before. Where Elms expected straight punches, Bruce gave him something different. Where Elms tried to corner him, Bruce slipped away like water. Round after round, Bruce Lee outworked the champion. His speed was unreal. His timing was precise. His ability to read Elms's movements and react before they even fully developed. It was like watching someone from the future. The judges watched in disbelief. The crowd watched in silence. Gary Elms, the three-time champion, the undefeated king of interschool boxing, was being systematically dismantled by a 17-year-old kung fu practitioner who had never competed in boxing before. When the final bell rang, there was no doubt. Bruce Lee won by unanimous decision. Every single judge gave him the victory. It was not even close. The crowd erupted. Bruce Lee had just done the impossible. He had beaten an unbeatable opponent in a sport he had never formally trained in. This should have been the greatest moment of his young life. But it was not. Here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Bruce Lee won. Dominated, actually. But when he left that ring, he was not celebrating, he was frustrated. Angry even. Why? Because he could not knock Gary Elms out. Throughout the entire fight, Bruce landed countless punches. He hit Elms with everything he had. He connected with shots that should have ended the fight. But Elms kept standing, and Bruce knew exactly why. The 8-ounce gloves. In a real fight, on the streets of Hong Kong, those punches would have done serious damage. Bruce had been in enough street fights to know the difference. But boxing gloves changed everything. They padded his fists. They absorbed impact. They turned his precise, devastating strikes into points on a scorecard instead of fight-ending blows. Bruce Lee had won the match. But he felt like he had lost something more important. He had been forced to play by someone else's rules, fight in someone else's system. And even though he succeeded, he realized a terrifying truth. Traditional martial arts, even his beloved Wing Chun, had limitations. Real combat was different from what he had been taught. And if he wanted to become truly effective, truly unstoppable, he needed to find a new way. This moment haunted Bruce Lee, not the victory. The frustration. He kept replaying the fight in his mind, analyzing every exchange, questioning every technique. he had been taught. Why could he not generate enough power to finish the fight? Why did the boxing rules expose weaknesses in his Wing Chun training? What was missing from his martial arts education? These questions consumed him, and slowly, very slowly, answers began to emerge. Bruce realized that no single martial art had all the answers. Wing Chun was excellent for close range combat, but it lacked powerful long-range striking. Boxing had incredible punching power, but it ignored kicks, elbows, and grappling. Every style had strengths. Every style had weaknesses. And the truly effective fighter, the one who could handle any situation, needed to take the best from all styles and discard the rest. This was revolutionary thinking. In the 1950s, martial arts were sacred traditions. You did not mix styles. You did not question your masters. You practiced what you were taught and nothing else. But Bruce Lee was different. He did not care about tradition for tradition's sake. He cared about what worked. And that boxing match against Gary Elms had shown him, with painful clarity, that blind devotion to any single style was a path to limitation. The seed had been planted. Think about this for a moment. A 17-year-old kid wins a boxing match, and instead of celebrating, he starts questioning everything he has ever learned. That is not normal. That is the mindset of a genius. That is why Bruce Lee became Bruce Lee. After the Gary Elms fight, Bruce Lee changed. His training became more intense, more experimental, more open-minded. He started studying other martial arts. Not just watching, but analyzing, breaking down techniques to understand why they worked or why they failed. He read books on fencing, on Western boxing, on wrestling and judo. He talked to fighters from different backgrounds, asked questions that made traditional martial artists uncomfortable. What makes a punch powerful? Why do some techniques work in the ring but fail on the street? How can the human body generate maximum force in minimum time? These were not questions a typical Wing Chun student would ask. But Bruce Lee was not typical, and his search for answers would eventually lead him far beyond Hong Kong. His parents, seeing his continued involvement in street fights and his rebellious nature, made a difficult decision. They sent Bruce to America. It was supposed to calm him down, keep him out of trouble, give him a fresh start. Instead, it gave him the freedom to evolve. In America, Bruce Lee continued his journey. He studied philosophy at the University of Washington. He opened martial arts schools. He met students and teachers from completely different backgrounds. And he never forgot that boxing match. The frustration of not being able to knock out Gary Elms stayed with him. It drove him. He trained his punches to be faster, harder, more efficient. He studied the mechanics of power generation, how to use the entire body, not just the arm, to deliver devastating strikes. He developed techniques specifically designed to finish fights quickly. No points. No decisions, just clean, efficient victory. And eventually, all of this research, all of this experimentation, all of this questioning, led to something revolutionary. Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. A martial art that was not really a martial art. A philosophy of fighting that rejected rigid styles and embraced adaptability. Take what is useful, discard what is useless. Add what is specifically your own. These words became the foundation of modern, mixed martial arts. They influenced fighters, teachers, and martial artists around the world. And it all started with a boxing match that a 17-year-old won, but could not stop thinking about. Today, we take mixed martial arts for granted. UFC fighters train in boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and kickboxing. Nobody thinks twice about combining styles. But in Bruce Lee's time, this was heresy. Traditional martial artists called him a traitor. They said he was disrespecting ancient traditions. Some even challenged him to fights to prove their styles were superior. Bruce Lee did not care. He knew what worked. He had tested his theories in real situations, and he had the results to prove it. The Gary Elms fight taught him that rules and traditions could become prisons. That true martial arts was about constant growth, constant adaptation, constant questioning. When Bruce Lee died in 1973, he was only 32 years old. But in those 32 years, he accomplished more than most martial artists achieve in multiple lifetimes. He changed how the world saw martial arts. He changed how fighters trained. He changed what was possible. And it all traces back to that gymnasium in Hong Kong. To a 17-year-old standing in a boxing ring. To a victory that felt like a defeat. So what can we learn from this story? First, winning is not always enough. Bruce Lee won that fight. But he was not satisfied with just winning. He wanted to understand why he could not do more. That dissatisfaction drove him to greatness. Second, frustration can be fuel. Most people would have celebrated and moved on. Bruce Lee used his frustration to push himself further than anyone thought possible. Third, question everything. The moment you stop questioning is the moment you stop growing. Bruce Lee questioned techniques that had been taught for centuries. And in doing so, he created something entirely new. That boxing match against Gary Elms was not just a fight. It was a turning point. A moment when a young martial artist realized that the path to mastery was not about following traditions blindly, but about finding truth through personal experience. Bruce Lee won that day. But more importantly, he learned. And that made all the difference. If this story inspired you, smash that like button and subscribe for more untold stories about Bruce Lee. Drop a comment below. What do you think Bruce Lee would say about modern MMA? I read every comment. Until next time, be water, my friend.